Hey, what's going on, fellers? It's Matty O here, doing something a little bit different today. We've got the 2013 Mini Cooper S R56 chassis. We're going to be doing shock absorbers and shock mounts today. Now I want you to listen as I go down my bumpy driveway. We're already past the bumps, but you probably heard some creaking. There it is in the background. It sounds like there's some loose interior component. That sound is actually the shock mount, and the bushing, the rubber components are worn out. They're rubbing against metal. They're making a lot of sound. This car's got 110,000 miles on it. In my opinion, the shock absorbers are also worn out. It's not too bad right now, but when you're going highway speed, you hit a bump, the jolt, the energy from the spring is not being absorbed properly by the shock absorber, and it results in some kind of twitchy handling up front, and it's been getting worse. I've noticed it over the past couple of years. I would say it's definitely becoming a problem now. So this is my wife's car, and I take care of it for her. And if you've seen my other videos, you may have seen me featuring this car while enjoying a certain controversial adult beverage, and you might get the impression I think this car is girly or something like that, but I actually really do enjoy this car. Unfortunately, I didn't have a say in the gearbox that this car was purchased with, so it does come equipped with the slush box. It's actually a pretty nice Aisin 6-speed transmission. I was actually floored to learn that. It is a really good automatic transmission. I'll tell you what, if you've been wrenching and if you never put a Mini into service position, you are missing out on life. So the goal today, we're going to pull off the old shocks. We're going to pull off the old shock mounts. We're going to reuse the factory springs. I checked with the wife. She doesn't want to change any of the handling characteristics or the ride height of the vehicle. And we do live in a rural area with some occasional uneven terrain and whatnot. So the ride height is going to be retained by using the factory springs. I'm going to have to use some spring compressors to take the springs off and install them onto the new shocks. Of course, if you're upgrading your Mini, you may choose to get a preloaded strut assembly or a coil over. We've already got the springs mounted, and that is an option. It definitely takes out probably the most dangerous part of doing this job, which is removing the springs. If you're not careful, you're not compressing the spring properly or at all, you are basically playing with a grenade, because the spring is under compression. When you take the top off the shock absorber, the strut assembly, all that energy, that last thread of that nut, you can seriously injure yourself or others. So do not attempt doing anything like that without the proper tools and the proper know-how. Fortunately, I was a kid with a little Honda Accord, and I learned how to do all that stuff early on, and I never made that mistake. I've made plenty of others. What I'm looking to fix today, hopefully this thing rides like a new car when I'm done. Definitely it feels its age on the road. The handling is a little bit wonky and sloshy, but I'm hoping that the shocks are gonna make the car feel new again. It's gonna tighten up the handling, especially when we hit a bump and we have some unchecked suspension resonance, essentially is what I would describe it as. I think the new shocks are gonna help tighten it up a bit. I purchased all of these parts from ECS Tuning. They are not sponsoring the video. This is completely on my own. I've used ECS Tuning for specific buying parts for this car because they usually have a good selection of OEM and aftermarket parts depending on what I'm looking for, and their shipping time historically has been lightning fast. They've been a good company to deal with. There's a lot of different companies out there for the Mini stuff. I haven't been impressed with some of them, but ECS Tuning has been my go-to place for parts for this car. On a personal level, I speak highly of them. So yeah, let's mosey on over to the workshop and tear into this thing. All right, we got the Cooper in the garage. I'm gonna go ahead and get the parts out. Let's take a look, see what we got. And then I'm gonna get this thing jacked up. I'm gonna lift it all 4 corners. I think we'll just get the whole thing in the air. And then I'm just gonna do one side at a time. I'll probably start in the front, work my way to the back. We'll see how things go. Sun's out, guns out, baby. I guess you can fit 4 shocks in that. Excellent. All right, so let's see what we got in here. Again, all this stuff I bought from ECS Tuning. They've got everything I've ever needed to find for the Mini, from maintenance stuff, OEM stuff, to aftermarket upgrade stuff. So I'm pretty sure I'll be continuing to use them into the future. These are, I'm guessing these are probably the rear shock mounts. I'm not sure, because I think the front ones pivot and this looks more complex. Yeah, do they not pivot though? Oh, they totally do pivot. Okay, so front shock mount right there, straight from Limforda for the Mini. So we got those. The back ones are pretty simple, as you can imagine. We've got a couple of bushings and a little sleeve in there. We'll figure out how that all goes together. I had the same thing on my Z go bad, and it made a racket. So I think that's what's making all the noise back there. And I think the front ones, because the shock actually rotates as you turn the steering wheel, I think that's gonna improve our handling of the vehicle substantially. See, ECS, they always give you a little wine discount thing. If that's your thing, I might take them up on it. I might need it after this. We did go Bilstein, which I think is pretty much OEM. This is probably an OEM equivalent replacement. Here again, the wife didn't want to change the handling too much, so these are very simple, no adjustability. It's not fun, and I'm pretty certain these are the front ones and they are not loaded, but let's see. And by loaded, I mean with spring. They are not. Here's your strut assembly. This is gonna we're gonna put the mount on it, take the OEM spring off, the original spring, and get them installed. So it should be a hoot. Stay tuned. I got my spring compressors, I see them. I think we got all the parts and tools we need. So time to get this thing up in the air. I just need this high enough to get the wheels floating. I gotta take the wheels off. Hopefully I won't have to crawl into the car today. I'm not expecting that. Let me get at it. Get after it, boy. Gotta be 5. I don't know, dude. Well, this is as far as we got, right? Couldn't get the sway bar off, and we can't just launch it. Let's see if we can't crack it off. There it goes. So that was the key to success. Didn't have this flare on it. I could get a ratchet wrench on it or something. Maybe just a little easier, but we gotta play by the rules. Tedious pain in the butt. Such is working on the Mini. I did spray a little blaster on it to try to make this process as painless as possible. Maybe now I can hold it with the wrench and zip it off. So if you're gonna do it this way, if you're gonna loosen it from the fastener, make sure you reverse the threads. It's righty-loosey. Pack your patience. Once it's loose, you'll know it's loose. All right, disconnection achieved. I think I'll do this first. Let's see if we can get some droop out of this. This looks like a what, 17, 18 or 19? Tried 18 since this is loosey-goosey. These stink bugs, holy God, dude, they make the place smell like cilantro. It's obnoxious. We used to get them down in Florida too, and then they kind of stopped. I guess they discovered Georgia and said, oh, it's less populated, let's go there. That's what everyone from Florida is doing, right? Myself included. I can't even talk smack. That was easy. Air tools for the win. So with our lower strut bolt off, I'm gonna try to gently tap the knuckle off the shock. You can see it easily came out. This is overkill, this hammer, so I'm just very lightly doing it. Get this clear of this. Okay, like that. That wasn't too bad. So now, when I take these top bolts out up here, this shock should come right on down. Okay. This one, they put the cowling right here. I think that'll be enough. If I couldn't do it with that, I'd just grab an extension, get this ratchet up a little bit higher, but we are golden. Your body is the cameraman. I can definitely tell the shock wants to droop. I'm gonna just kind of support it so I don't think I would damage any threads on these nuts, but I don't want to take the chance. And then she's gonna just drop down for us like that. Watch your brake lines, watch all your things. It's a little bit tight. What's going on? What are we hung up on? Nothing. Okay, so cool. There's our assembly. Oh yeah, we got some slop in this thing. So let's break this down. Shock number one, strut number one, whatever we call it, out. This is from passenger side, the right-hand side. Made in Poland, nice. It's hard to test a shock absorber with a spring on it. In fact, out of the car, I'd say it's impossible. But just looking at the mount, I can tell we've got some slop in this thing. So even just replacing these mounts is gonna improve the handling and the feel of the vehicle. So the next order of business is I'm gonna get my spring compressor on. It's gonna go literally claw onto the spring coils, and we're gonna crank down on it. It's gonna take all of the tension off the spring, and it's going to enable us to take this upper mount off safely so that we can remove the spring and insert our new strut assembly into place. I'm gonna pop off my little dust cap here. Comes right off. That's the nut that's holding on, so we will get to that. We need to first relieve some tension. So I'm gonna fit one side of the spring compressor, kind of like this. I'll get it going by hand here so it stays put These are great. I've had these, oh golly, man. I've had these spring compressors since I was 18 or 19 years old, and I'm damn near 40 now, so they have served me well. They've done many a suspension job, many a spring and shock replacement. They are a must-have if you're going to do any suspension work like this. This is not an optional tool for this job. And I just set them 180 degrees apart. So roughly 180 degrees apart. Now at this point we got a couple options. Oops. Okay. They have I think it's 18 or 19. Now I'm curious, I want to see, is it 19? Is it 21? Yeah, it's 21. So you can use a 21 hex nut on their socket. But I've had success just using a 1/2 inch socket on here and just going like that. Oh, that's a reducer, man. How evil is that? So A or B, pick your poison. Got options. You can crank down on this with an air tool. That's how I used to do it. But I like to get my fitness on these days, so I will manually do it. And you can see it's just pinching the spring. Keep your fingers out of there and anything you don't particularly want to squish or lose. And I just kind of try to evenly tighten them. And we're literally compressing this spring. There's nothing really magical happening. We're trying to make it so there's no tension on this shock mount. And we can take it off without having a projectile launch into our face at a high velocity. And you can see I'm running out of threads here, so let's get this side as tight as we can and see where we're at. Probably not a great idea to keep your hand on the spring itself, but just in case the tool were to fail, you might have a shock, but I have not had that happen. So I will recommend against it and not heed my own advice. It's pretty typical for me. And you can see we're starting to get a gap at the top, which is what we want. I may have to position this compressor lower because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get enough compression on it. I'm running out of threads. It's about as far as we could take it. You'll know you're ready to rock when the spring can jiggle around in there freely, and we are not at that point yet. No, so I need to improve this in a little bit. I'm gonna make my life easy since I've dicked around with this a little bit longer than I would like to at this point. I'm just gonna try to get in here. It's not ideal, is it? We're having a hard time getting up in here. See if I can shove it in a little. I don't think so. Okay. I'm gonna, oops. Trying to do it from down here. And just try to snug this up the best we can. This up. We just gotta go for broke here. About as good as we're gonna get it, I think. Now you can see we've taken a great deal of the spring tension off. I usually like to actually have this spring moving around in here, so I'll see if I can get it any looser, but I think, oh, there, we're in business. So look, see what I'm talking about? Just had to crank down on it. I can move the spring independently in there. So I'm confident that we can take this nut off. Here again, we've got a hex key in there for that nut. We're gonna have to deal with that, but we should be able to do this without killing ourselves. Let's find that out for sure. I've had to rig up tools to do this before. My Mustang had a similar shock absorber setup. This is a 22, might be a 21. I've got one somewhere, 21, there it is. Okay, essentially, we're gonna have to try to pop this off. You could try it with air tools, see if you get lucky, but it's probably gonna just spin like it did. So, what I have done in the past, gotta figure out what kind of Allen key it is. Now this is a little beefier than our sway bar link, which is good news for us. I think it's a 6. Yeah, let that thing go. We got a 6. I'll take my 21. I'm gonna get a pair of vice grips. I'm gonna take my vice grips on my socket, snug it up, so that I can hold it. I'm gonna come in through this. Oh, it's too big. It doesn't go deep enough. I don't think I've got a smaller 21, do I? So I've got my suitable socket, got my ratchet, and we can just start to loosen this up. Now keep in mind, it's the opposite of what you think. And you'll want to make sure that this is coming off. There's no tension on it. That's how we know our spring is not going to destroy our face or our hand or our friends or neighbors or our property. If you can move this around freely, you know there's no spring tension on it. So because I'm holding the nut, we're turning the shock to the right to unthread this locking nut. So those are the key points there, kind of the opposite of what you might think. And the nut should be coming off, which it is. I'll show you all that. Take a look. Accomplish this safe, in a safe fashion. Everything is off. Keep your nut. I don't think we get a new one. We're gonna replace the shock mount. We'll see if we get a dust cap. And just keep the parts in order so you kind of have an idea of what went where, especially if you've never done this before. Got our little holder on her there. The spring will come off. We've got a bump stop and a dust boot. We're gonna save those. I think we're gonna reuse those. Take our spring off. Keep in mind, you've got a bottom, you've got a top on your spring. Don't reverse those. And then we've got our old shock. So let's get our new parts together and put this thing back together. So we've got all our parts laid out, new and the old. Always make sure you're putting in the correct shock. We're working on the right side of the vehicle. So I have the right shock. And this one looks like it has an R on it. This one I'm not seeing an R or an L. It might be stamped on there somewhere and I'm just missing it. But an easy way to check is just compare it with your old shock and look for all your mounting points for your hardware and whatnot. If we had the wrong shock, we would be looking at a scenario like this where it's the mirror image. You know, like, oh, that doesn't make sense. This is over here and we're missing our tab, so we know this is gonna go on the left side of the vehicle. So just a way to save yourself some grief. Pay attention to detail. It will benefit you. It looks like our rubber spring seat is going to carry over from our original vehicle. So I'm gonna take that off. I like to clean this stuff up a little bit while I'm in here. And I'm not gonna, rinse it off or do anything crazy. I'm just gonna kind of wipe off the dust a little bit. It just makes me feel like I'm doing a better job than I really am. In all honesty, I probably should have sourced some new ones just to refresh everything, but not necessary, I don't think. It looks like I tore the little tab off. So see that? We got a little groove there. Boom, it sits in. The spring is going to keep that. This little foot that came off, not a big deal. We don't need to worry about that. So a couple things. We are not reusing the nut. They gave us a new nut, so we've got an extra part for a nut. We will be reusing this dust cap. I didn't see one with the new mount. This top mount for the shock, we're going to be reusing that. This sits in there, so we're going to be using those two things. We've got our washer and our little grease collar here. We are reusing these things. They go on like so. We are also reusing our bump stop and our dust boot, so you can kind of keep those together like that. So at this point, we can clearly see, and this is how you know you got a blown shock. I can just send that home with very little effort. And that tells you this shock, as far as dampening ability goes, it's really non-existent. You can compare that with our new one that is much more difficult to do. So that, folks, is the difference between a blown shock and a new shock. And when people feel like their car is getting old and it's a box and it's a beater and it just doesn't drive the way it used to, it's usually because your suspension components are worn out. And I'm the kind of person, I love to drive my vehicles into the ground. I don't like having a car payment, but I like having a vehicle that drives like it's a new car. And replacing your shocks, replacing your suspension components, it is the key to happiness. Good tires, good suspension components, you're gonna have a car that feels brand new, guaranteed. You're at that 100,000 mile mark. This is why people feel like they need to go buy a new car, because they don't understand what's going on, why their vehicle doesn't feel new anymore. And it's because components like this wear out. And when you can refresh them, renew them, you have a vehicle that is better than a new car. In my opinion, of course. So I'm just taking the nut off here. You'll see I've positioned this spring to line up in the bottom seat there. I'm going to begin to reassemble these things. We're going to get our dust boot on and our bump stop. I'm trying not to touch the shaft of this shock because I just don't want to get grease and dirt on it. It's going to happen, so it's not the end of the world, but I would rather not be the initial source of those materials. So I'm just positioning these things on. You don't have to worry about this too much, how these parts sit on here. We're just kind of lining things up. So this is where you want to make sure the end of this coil spring is going to align with this mount. This is so everything seats nicely like that. Okay, and then these components just slide on like that. Make sure you're getting your new shock mount here. You can tell because the bearing is nice and fresh. And this doesn't really seat one way or the other. It's actually rotates so the suspension can turn with the vehicle. It's a McPherson Strut setup. All right, we're gonna get our nut started. Now this wasn't so bad, was it? Having the right tools is the key to success with this, always. Okay, and this is a nylock nut, so don't expect to really be able to tighten it too much. I'm gonna cut to the chase, get my Allen key up, but hold on, okay, yeah, it's the same, I think. So remember, we're gonna do lefty-loosey here. We could set it down. Just make sure your spring, everything's lined up. How are we looking? I don't think it's doing nothing. I think we got a different They changed that nut on us, man. Look at it. So they do that sometimes. Fucking aggravating. They changed the nut. You bastard! I'd be sitting there all day. When it didn't up. Okay. Make sure everything's still aligned reasonably so. And now we're getting somewhere, I think. I need a little bit deeper. Maybe I could choke up on it. And this is my super secret way of doing these McPherson struts with the vice grips and the socket and the Allen. I don't know how others do it. That's just how I do it. I don't know, maybe they got a tool that makes it slightly easier, but it's always worked for me doing it this way. We're making progress. That's that. So when the vice grips break off, you know you're there. And honestly, we don't need to go nuts on this. No pun intended. Snug enough should be good. I think we are set. We got ample threads on it. It feels good. A little wiggly, but not like that one. So finally, we're gonna position our spring to seat properly in its different spots. Okay. And when we're good with that, we can release the tension. Easy does it. Just keep an eye on things, make sure nothing dances around, everything's lined up. That's that. We're ready to throw this back in the vehicle. Not so bad, right? All right, folks, it's time to reinstall this. Try to remember how things were. We had this for our sway bar mount, that link, and that faced the inner side of the car. So we'll keep that in mind. Just gonna try to fit it in here into the tower. This could be a little tricky trying to get it in. I don't know if this is gonna net me anything better. Maybe. Just watch your brake lines and stuff. We don't need to tear anything off. Okay. And I'm looking at the top here, trying to find the holes. Make sure that's lined up. Looks like we got a little nub there. It's gonna go in one of them holes. If y'all could see that, try to see what I'm talking about. I got that little nubby. See if I can line that up. Let's see. You gotta kind of line it up from the bottom, and then you bring it up through the top. It can take a little finagling, and this strut brace doesn't make it easier to see what you're doing, but you'll get these studs sticking up through. Get your nuts started. That little smooth part goes down. It lines everything up. I think those are the factory nuts anyway. I'm not gonna snug it up just yet because I gotta get it seated in the knuckle. I wanna do that first. Okay, so I'm just trying to get this seated. I wanna watch all my brake lines, ABS lines, all that good stuff. And make sure the shock is generally lined up where it needs to go, like that. Get everything, and keep in mind I don't have the top tightened up yet, so I can kind of move things around. I'm actually going to get a floor jack up under the lower control arm, and we'll use that to lift it up. Get our floor jack in, and this will enable us to, and I'm just under those bolts there, to kind of seat this shock in the knuckle. Just make sure everything's lined up and be careful as you do this. It's not really going as easily as I'd like. There it goes. I don't know why it's fighting me so much. you don't want to fight this on two different fronts. You know what I mean? Now, to get this shock seated in the knuckle, we really shouldn't have to resort to torching or high application of heat. We should be able to convince it to go into place with the floor jack. So I'm just trying to align it so there's no real binding going on or anything like that. And I'm gonna just try to get my floor jack up under the bottom of this knuckle. I'm avoiding the brake rotor. There's a couple bolts on the bottom of the knuckle. I'm just trying to lift from there and keep this aligned so that it doesn't bind as we go up. And I think we'll get it seated that way. At least I hope. Put a little penetrating lube on it. I just want it to seat. I'm lining up this tab. We gotta get that seated properly. Back to it. Put a little tension on it with the jack. See if we can't get it to seat. There we go. Look at that. So the secret sauce was getting a little tension on it with the jack and then tapping the knuckle so it kind of finds its way home. So that's a very important step, is seating these struts in the knuckle. They should sit in there like that. And that, show you on this one, this flange goes in between that pinch point and the bolt goes through there. So there really is no question about how far that strut's supposed to seat in the knuckle. We're gonna tighten up our pinch bolt on the shock. All right, get this zipped up. Okay, I like it. Do a final check on our top bolts. We are snug as a bug. All right, groovy. We can get our sway bar link back on. And I put my little dust cap on that upper strut nut. Remember, when we're doing these Allen key ones, to tighten it up is to loosen it. And that's that side. So the other side's gonna be the same way. So I'm gonna do that now, and I'll meet you out back. Time to get the back done, because the front's all done, and I'm pretty certain that the front of the car was the more difficult of the two axles. Let's find that out for sure. But before we do that, now that I got the front back down on the ground, the tires on, it's time to lift the back of the car, get the tires off, and then we'll pick a side and get to it. So, before we get cranking on the back, there's just a couple things I want to point out. First of all, when you initially look at the rear, you might be inclined to think that you're going to have to detach these shock absorbers from the interior of the car. I'm here to tell you, no, that's not the case. On the bottom, you've got two bolts that affix the shock absorber to the vehicle. It looks like there's a plastic cover on the bottom. Will pop off. I'm going to get there in a minute, but I did just want to point out how badly destroyed that this shock mount is. I mean, you can see the urethane is deteriorated. This, you hear that? That is the noise that we are hearing in the cabin when we traverse down the road. If you're hearing a rattling and it sounds like a loose piece of plastic on the interior, it's not that. It's your shock mount. And when this thing goes, your shock absorber is essentially just bouncing around as the car goes. So if you've got an annoying rattle from either the right or the left side or both sides. So to get this out, we're gonna pop off our little plastic cover. It just clamps on. We've got a bolt that's accessible from the back side. That's got to come off. And then of course, as I pointed out, we've got our two upper shock mount bolts. Those look like 14 millimeter. This feels like maybe a 17 or an 18. And the idea is we will disconnect these fasteners and hopefully be able to lift this shock out of here. I may have to disconnect some of the components back here, but I don't want to do that just yet. So we got a 13 loose, and they are not very tight, and that's okay. So I'm hoping we'll have enough droop in this to pop out this shock, but we may need to disconnect the sway bar to achieve that. We're going to cross that bridge shortly. I always like when these front wheel drive cars give the rear suspension some thought. I used to see like a beam axle on some of the 80s and 90s front wheel drive cars. Not really the Japanese ones, but a lot of the domestics were doing that, and it was to save money, but it doesn't do much for the handling of the ride. Of course, DOS Auto here, they wouldn't be caught dead with a beam axle into that. As they kill off the manual transmission. You can just see nothing fancy here. Nothing that. These two bolts. There's a plate where the shock mounts. And I will tell you right now, the rear springs have a much lower. They have a much lower spring rate than the front. So even compressing these springs is going to be an easier time. Are we almost out? My lord. A never-ending bolt. Will you come? My God. Are we almost there? Holy mother of... Thank you. Okay. They did not deprive us of threads. Ugh, I'm just trying to get an idea how much droop we're gonna get. I'm gonna disconnect the sway bar because I'm gonna need a little bit more droop to get this shock out of here. I already knew it, so why not embrace the situation? Fortunately, the sway bar lengths on this side, they look a little more accessible. I think we're gonna be all right with getting them out of there, but they are 5. We can. So a little trick with getting these loose initially, you can hit it with an air tool if you got it, but I'm just gonna try to even do it by hand. And this works on the shocks too. Just kind of get it loose, you know, break it. It'll probably start to spin the whole nut till you got the Allen key in there. But it's a nice way to get things started in a positive way. Key in there. See, now we're good. Allen key seated. We spin our nut off. So we will have enough droop, I think, to pop this out. Let's break the nut on the bottom off. Okay. Air tools make it easy. I'm gonna see if I can kind of push down on this. There we go. I'm pushing down. Shock dropped out. I just need to convince it to come. We've got an ABS sensor connected to it, and it looks like the brake line. I failed to detach those, so I'm doing that now. I think we'll be free. So, as with the front, we're going to use our spring compressors to take the edge off these springs and release compression. Don't be fooled by this shock mount thinking there's no tension on here. This is actually the cap, and this nut is holding things on. So we need to release the tension first. As with the front, I have made sure I have a matching shock I'm going to use for replacement. Key points here, the bracket for the brake line and the ABS wire match, along with the bushing there for the bolt. So I think we're in business. So yeah, let's get to the spring compression sequence. Again, this is going to be noticeably easier than the front. I can assure you all that. In the interest of time, I am going to air tool it. And when you can move, really, when you can move the spring like that, you know you're in business. Take the nut off here. Now, you can do this on the front or the back. I don't know if I showed myself doing this earlier, but a nice way to get this started, just hit it. Just hit it once with the air gun. If it's crusty and rusted on there, that'll help break that corrosion off and make it easy to remove. I'm going to do the same thing with my vice grips. We're going to be righty loosening. That's because we're manipulating the fastener, not the nut. We're actually oh, we're totally off. Cool. Alright. So, here again, just trying to keep all my parts kind of in order. Things like that. So, this goes under. This goes under. That goes there. This is the bump stop. We will be reusing the bump stop. And the spring seat. We'll be reusing that. Looks like even this bottom spring seat we'll be reusing, because this one doesn't have one. So I'm just gonna pop that off with a screwdriver. That's kind of annoying, because I gotta peel this dust boot off. Couldn't put a rubber seat on that. That's fine. I mean, I'm not worried about the old one. It's just the new one. I gotta pop this dust cap off. Oh, this one comes right off. So, okay. Anything to save a dime, right? I'm popping off the dust cap on my old shock so I can remove the bottom spring seat. It's rubber, and it gives the spring a nice comfy spot to live. And the new shock doesn't have that, so I want to put that on there. I'll take the nut off for a second. Take that dust cap off, and then just send this guy home. Like that. Now we're in business. Put that back on. All right. I think we're kind of, sort of, ready to reassemble. These are the parts for the new shock mount. All right. Now, I really didn't get a good look at it, but I've done these before and it's pretty straightforward. We're gonna forgo using that collar, but basically what will end up happening is, pretty sure I'm doing that wrong. Pretty sure it goes like that. And that gives us a little bit of isolation with the way this goes. And this nut goes on the bottom here. So kind of that soaks up all of that vibration on the road and what have you. So here again, if you're getting funky rattle sounds in your back, you need shock mounts. I can essentially guarantee that's the problem. All right, we'll get our new spring, or excuse me, our old spring on. It doesn't look like it really matters on this bottom mount. Let's check the top. We do have a groove for that top spring, so make sure you're lined up there. Okay. And then we're gonna get our cap on for the shock. Make sure spring is still situated. I'm happy with that. Okay. Get our little washer on. And that's why it's helpful to take these things off in a certain order. Here again, the shock mount, it goes on like that. Ours was destroyed, so it's understandable if you were dealing with something like that and you might be a little confused as to how it goes. So just look how I did it. I've done these before. I think I'm doing it right. It makes sense when you look at it. The bottom bushing here kind of seats on the bottom of the shock mount, and then the top matches with this washer. It's all gonna get tightened up and sandwiched together and have a harmonious rest of its life. Now here's something funny. On both the front and the rear shocks, we had different nuts each time. On the front they went smaller, on the back they went larger. So if that's not aggravating as all hell, I don't know what is. There it is. I'm gonna have to, we'll be all right with that, I think. And then just remember, our ratchet, we're gonna lefty-loosey to actually tighten this up. It is completely normal as you tighten this for the shock mount to squish. It's doing its job, it's fine. And you really can't over tighten it, because what'll end up happening is the collar is gonna seat on the shaft of this shock absorber, and it will stop us from going any further. So don't over tighten it or anything silly. But essentially, we're gonna check our spring alignment. We look good. We're gonna back off our spring compressors here. And then we're gonna be ready to install this back in the vehicle. Cool. Let's get this installed. Just a couple things to remember. This bushing, the silver part, is going to face our brake rotor. Just keep that in mind. You will also need to position your shock mount. It's going to be firm once you've got everything tight, now that we have the new mount on there, but you can rotate this, so just be ready to use a little bit of effort. It shouldn't be too hard though. And then just try to get everything in to position without snagging your brake line. The brake line, the ABS are inboard. Don't get them on the wrong side. You won't be able to seat them in their house if you do that. All right. And then at this point, I'm gonna try to get the bottom bolt started with a few threads, if I can find it. Okay. And I'm probably gonna have to push down on the control arm a little bit, which I'm doing with my right elbow as I try to find the hole. I'm almost there. There we go. And I'm just getting that started by hand. I'm gonna rotate my upper shock down a little bit and just make sure your suspension link is free, ready to reinstall as well. You don't want it to get caught somewhere it shouldn't. I may have to spin my upper mount here around. It looks like it only goes one way. I don't know if y'all can see, there's a little contour to this thing. It's got a slope down that faces the outside of the car. I'm going to start the lower bolt by hand, just so I'm not cross-threading it. It's going, so we'll snug that up with the air tools in a minute. Good job. And then we just have our upper bolts. Just working on these upper mounts. There were a lot of threads, so get ready. I'm also going to make sure Get my sway bar link started. If you're having trouble lining it up, I just had to push down on the sway bar itself. There, it looks like there's also a crescent wrench indentation on the back of those sway bar links. If you don't feel like doing it with the Allen key, looks like you got an alternate option. I would be assuming the front's the same way. I didn't really check. And not too tight. Who am I to challenge das Auto? I just hate that have one shear off. I get too old for this, man. I think they need to make these bolts longer. What do y'all think? Okay, we good? We good. So we gotta tighten up our sway bar link. I do just want to demonstrate. Look at how little slop there is in this thing now. No noise whatsoever. It's gonna, I swear, man, it's gonna feel like a brand new car. It's gonna sound like a brand new car. So don't get stuck in a car payment. Don't trade your shit in. Fix what you have. Keep it running. I wish more people had that kind of mindset. It'd be a lot less wasteful as a society. But whatever, to each their own. All right, I'm gonna get some air tools here. And lest we forget our ABS. Oh, it's fun making videos. It takes me twice as long because is this good shot? Use two hands, but there we go. Perfect. And finally, secure our sway bar link. And then we will do this all over again for the other side. Hold that guy. Ouch. Cool, I'm gonna do the other side. Don't forget, get your plastic little booty bolt cover there. Doesn't really do much, but we're gonna put it back on. And we're gonna do the other side. I will tune back in when that side's done and we're ready to test it out. That was more fun than tadpoles in a glass of milk. I don't even know what that means. All right, we are done here. It is now time to take this thing for a spin and assess the fruits of our labor. Join me after I wash my hands. All right, forgive me with all my mess today. I guess my microphone, my external mic stopped working, so we're rolling with the camera audio like the good old days. Test our workout now. What better way to run to the store to pick up some Bud Light? So I noticed the rattling in the interior is gone. Yeah, man, I guess it's normal cabin noise at this point. God, it feels so much better. The tightness is restored. It's noticeably different. Just cruising around the neighborhood. Well, I gotta say, this was money well spent. Thanks to ECS Tuning for having the parts for these little Mini Coopers. It's a one-stop shop for the crap you need. I dig them. They're good folks. They got helpful videos. They got a good selection of aftermarket and OE equivalent. Whenever the Mini is crying out for something, that's where I go. And
Yeah, I mean, even that bump, it took it like a champ. It didn't lose composure. But I would definitely recommend, if you're doing the shocks, do shock mounts too. The back ones were disintegrated. The front ones have the bearing, the McPherson struts, and they were a little sloppy. So those things combined with the shocks really helped make the car feel brand new. Like, I ain't even kidding. Alright, fellers, well, you know the drill. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I've inspired someone to pick up a wrench and make a mess of their little project. If this video helped you out, feel free to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more wrenching videos like this. Till next time, Mattio out.